Good morning or good afternoon, my YouTube viewers. It is Palestine here. Welcome to my channel. Got another hot day in the UK. And the thing is that UK is typically a cold country, and we don't really have air conditioning in our houses. And so when it gets hot, we just have to suffer. And I live in a very tiny apartment, and I'm in the kitchen, and there's a closet in the kitchen that has a water heater. So my apartment, it's hotter inside than it is outside. So I wanted to put my hair down, but you can see how much I'm sweating just this being this hot day. I think yesterday it was 37 degrees. And today it's going to be hot, like maybe 34 degrees. But 34 degrees is really hot, especially when you haven't got any air conditioning. So I'm under a lot of stress, a lot of relationship conflicts, and I don't know how much longer this is going to go on, but we'll see. But I don't want to talk to you about my relationship conflicts. Relationship conflicts are caused by the fact that my boyfriend does not like my Sikh friend. So that's causing a lot of problems, and it's upsetting me because I'm not married, and he's treating me like I'm his wife, and I'm not his wife. I'm his girlfriend. And there's a difference because I never took any wedding vows, and I never said I was going to be with him till death to us part, and in sickness and in health. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to cope with his mental sickness, because I never took any wedding vows, and I never agreed to do that. So what we'll do, we're going to talk about the Clancy case. That's in the news right now. And if you don't know what's going on with Clancy, then you haven't been looking at the news, and you haven't been looking at YouTube, because the Clancy case is in YouTube. And basically what happened was, in January 2023, she strangled her 3 children. And then what she did was she cut her wrist and her neck, and she jumped out a window. And she lived through jumping out of the window, but now she's paralyzed from the waist down. So now she is a paraplegic. Okay, so basically what they believe is, they believe that she had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. And so they believe that maybe she had bipolar too. So you have different types of bipolar, and they believe that she had bipolar too. But they believe she had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. And the reason why is because she was a really active person. After the birth of her first child, like a month after the birth of her first child, she went on a 5-mile run, and she went back to work after a few months. And then on the birth of her second child, she had 2 babies. She still went back to work after a few months. But after the birth of her third child, they believed that she got postnatal psychosis, and she never went back to work. So she never went back to work after the birth of her third child. And basically what she wanted was to have lots and lots of children. She said she wanted a baseball team. So she had the first baby. After she had the first baby, she was really anxious about going back to work because she didn't want to leave her baby, but she did because she was working as a nurse. And then after the birth of the second baby, again, she was really anxious about going back to work, but she did. She didn't want to leave her 2 babies alone. And then after the birth of her third baby, she didn't go back to work. And so after the So she had anxiety after the birth of the first baby, and she had anxiety after the birth of the second baby, but nobody ever picked it up. Nobody ever picked up that she had anxiety, and nobody ever picked up that she had probably had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. So when she was having babies and running 5-mile runs and exercising and going to the gym and going to work, that was probably a manifestation of bipolar, because most people can't do that. I know from my personal experience that I couldn't do that. Definitely not with 2 babies. And then so basically, she got depressed after the birth of the third baby. I think there were issues after the birth of the first baby and the second baby as well, because she had anxiety, and she said she didn't want to leave her babies, but she had to. She had to go back to work, and I don't know why they didn't just agree that if she wanted to have lots and lots of babies, that she would be a stay-at-home mom. But she actually was a nurse, and she was a labor and delivery nurse as well. So she obviously liked that. She liked having babies, and she liked being a labor and delivery nurse. So after baby number 3, they believe that she's always had undiagnosed bipolar, but after the birth of baby number 3, they believe she had postnatal psychosis. And so she wasn't sleeping. So the not sleeping was a manifestation of bipolar, because when you've got bipolar, you don't sleep very much. You just stay really active and you don't sleep very much. And during this time, after the birth of the third baby, so the birth of the third baby, I think he succumbed to what she did to him when he was like 8 months old. So she had bipolar, she had psychosis right away. Through a period of maybe 4 months, she had psychosis. And it was like at the thought of going back to work was one of the triggers. She may have had postnatal psychosis anyway, but one of the triggers was the thought of having to go back to work. And so if she wanted to have so many babies, she should have just been a stay-at-home mom. And so during these periods of bipolar and postnatal psychosis, she wasn't sleeping, and she said she was depressed. So she was going to see, she saw a psychiatric nurse one time, and I didn't know that a psychiatric nurse in the U.S. could prescribe psychiatric medication, because in the UK, a psychiatrist has to prescribe psychiatric medication, and they do it in conjunction with a pharmacist. And I know that because I have been sectioned twice. And so that's one of the reasons why I have an interest in this case. So basically, in the UK, a psychiatrist works together with a pharmacist, and they work together with all the drugs that the person is on, and they decide the best drugs for that person. But it seems to me that didn't happen in Lindsay Clancy's case, that she had a psychiatric nurse who hadn't been qualified very long, and this psychiatric nurse had been prescribing her lots of psychiatric medication. I don't think that would happen in the UK. I don't think that they would allow a psychiatric nurse to prescribe medication. And I know that because I was under the care of a psychiatric nurse. So I don't think that would happen in the UK. And in addition to speaking to this psychiatric nurse who didn't actually see her, she just saw, I think she saw her one time, and she started prescribing her medication. And then the rest of the times that she saw her, it was on more like a Zoom call or a Teams meeting or a Google Meet or something like that. And so in addition to getting medications from multiple sources, she also was phoning suicide hotlines. She phoned suicide hotlines at least 2 times. And then she wasn't sleeping. So the lack of sleep is, they believe, bipolar. They believe that the lack of sleep was bipolar, because apparently she would go like at least 48 hours with no sleep. And so, and she was prescribed by this psychiatric nurse and other people, because she was getting drugs from a minimum of 2 places. So again, it would be hard for that to happen in the UK, especially if you're under nationalized medicine. And now, if you had money and you could go to a private psychiatrist, they might prescribe you medication privately. But if you're using the national health system in the UK, well, I don't think that different doctors would be prescribing you different medication, because you would have to get that medication from a psychiatrist. And then the psychiatrist would have to be working together with a pharmacist to determine which medication is best for you based upon all of the other medication that you're on. So she was prescribed more than a dozen psychiatric medications across multiple health providers before the incident, before the children were harmed. And even before the children were harmed, she told her husband that she was worried about harming the children. And so the husband said to her, "Do you think that you should be away from the children?" And she said no, that she thought the children were safe, that she didn't want to be away from the children. Well, obviously, that wasn't true. The children weren't safe. And I've been watching YouTube videos about the case, because this is a case that is being live streamed. So you can watch the case in its entirety and see everything that's been happening. But the thing is for me personally, it's not in my interest to watch the case in its entirety, because I've got so many other things to do. But I guess if you are a lawyer or a psychiatrist or a pharmacist or a community psychiatric nurse or another type of health care professional, then it might be in your interest to watch the court case. I know the court case is being live streamed on YouTube, but because I'm busy, I've got lots of things to do, I would just rather someone like a lawyer, like Lawyer Lee or something like that, watch it and then tell me what it says. Because people who have YouTube channels that are monetized, they can watch it, and then they've got the equipment to video certain parts of the court case and then show it on YouTube. And that's what I would rather do. I would rather have somebody who actually has an interest in the case watch it and then tell me what it says. But one of the things that happened was, while she was on all this psychiatric medication, she was also like going to the gym and working out. She was taking her children to school. She was taking her children to school, taking her children to the doctors. She was going to parties. She was going to family events and things like that. If you're on psychiatric medication, you shouldn't even be driving. She was driving. She was driving herself to the hospital. She was driving herself to doctor's appointments. She was driving herself all over the place. I don't understand why these medical professionals didn't tell her that she couldn't drive while she was on all this psychiatric medication. But they didn't. They were letting her drive. The husband, she told the husband maybe 1 or 2 times that she was worried about, had thoughts of harming the children. The husband didn't do anything about it. He just asked her, should you be kept away from the children? And she said no, that the children were safe around her. And obviously they weren't. So I think he phoned his parents or her parents, or his parents or her parents came and stayed with him. And that was his solution to the problem. He didn't really, I don't think that he really fully took in the fact that his wife was telling him that she had thoughts of harming the children. I don't think that he took it seriously. He asked her, should you children be kept away from you? And she said, oh no, they're safe around me. And no, they weren't. But basically, so now, because she was prescribed more than a dozen psychiatric medications across multiple healthcare providers over a period of a few months. I'm not sure exactly how many months or week it was, but it wasn't a long time. It was over a period of a few months. Now, Lindsay Clancy and her husband, or now ex-husband, are suing these healthcare providers for giving her drugs, for giving her psychiatric medications. They're saying that they didn't give her psychiatric medication responsibly. I personally think that if a person is on psychiatric medication, they shouldn't be driving. But I do know, because my boyfriend's ex-wife takes psychiatric medication and she drives, and she was actually hospitalized, and she drives. So I don't think that they're taking this very seriously. Now, I have been on psychiatric medication and still am, and that's why I have an interest in this case, because Lindsay and her husband, or ex-husband, are saying that obviously she was overprescribed medication. And there's lots of people on YouTube saying that yes, she was overprescribed medication. And when she was given the first lot of medication, I think it was Zoloft or something, I'm not sure. But when she was given the first lot of medication, she had an adverse reaction to it. So basically, that should have told these mental health professionals that she was having an adverse reaction to the medication. But they responded to this adverse reaction by increasing the dosage. So I'm talking about Lindsay Clancy's now ex-husband. Basically, from what I've heard, is after the incident, obviously she did that to the children. And you can find out precisely what she did by watching YouTube videos. But she harmed the children, and 2 of them died after she did it, and another one died a day or so later, a few days later. And then what she did was she went and she slashed her wrist and neck, and then she jumped out the window, and it was a 30-foot jump. And so basically she broke her back, and now she is a paraplegic. So she's paralyzed from the waist down. So she did damage to herself as well. And she was saying her defense is that she was hearing voices. She was hearing a commanding male voice telling her to do it. That's her defense, that she was hearing voices. So she's trying to get off this on the grounds of insanity. But even if she gets off this on the grounds of insanity, she's going to be in a mental hospital, and she may be in a mental hospital for the rest of her life, because they're not going to just let her walk free. If she gets off on the grounds of insanity, she will be in a mental hospital. And I did say there was one lady that harmed her children, and she had to stay in the mental hospital for 8 years, and they finally let her go. And there was another lady who harmed her children, and she got off on the grounds of insanity. And from what I've heard, she's still in that mental hospital. So if you're in, if you get off on the grounds of insanity, they're not going to let you off. They're going to put you in a mental hospital. And then so when her husband, and what she did, in my opinion, was premeditated, because she ordered food from a restaurant that was farther away than the restaurant that they normally went to. And this is what I think is odd, that she sent her husband a text and asked her husband to pick this food up at this restaurant that was farther away. So she wanted him to be gone when she did it. And she also wanted him to pick up a prescription for one of the children. And so since he had to go pick up this food that was farther away than normal, than the place they normally went, and also this prescription, then he was gone for like maybe an hour or something. And then so he came back and he saw blood all over the house, and then he dialed 911, and then he found the wife was outside, and he was trying to keep the wife alive. And the wife told him that the children were in the basement. And so he went into the basement, and then he found out what she had done. And so I think that, yeah, obviously she's crazy. But I think that even though she's crazy, what she did was premeditated. Because why would she order food far away from a place that's farther away than normal, and then send the husband a text message and ask him to go pick up the food and pick up the prescription? And apparently, after the children, she did what she did to the children. I think she had even phoned the husband, and they had a 14-second conversation. So I don't know what was said, but she did actually phone the husband after she did what she did to the children. And then so the husband, after that, I think they said that they could not play the 911 call in the court because it was so harrowing. So obviously the husband went down to the basement to see the children, because the wife had told the husband that the children were in the basement. And he saw what she had done, and apparently his response was so horrific, so harrowing, that they couldn't play it in the court. So I don't know how harrowing it was. And I think there are YouTube videos that say the text of what he said, but I don't think they talk about his screaming and crying and stuff like that. So then they took the wife to the hospital, but she was arrested, even though she was injured herself, she was arrested. And so they had policemen watching her. And apparently the husband was so traumatized that he didn't go see her in the hospital. And then from what I understood, he had actually, from other accounts, is he actually had gone traveling when after the incident. So he didn't see her in the hospital. And then later on, so he moved. I think he was living in New York City, and he was interviewed by this publication. A few weeks after the incident, he asked people to forgive his wife, and he said she's not a monster, she's sick. But he definitely didn't take his marital vows seriously, because when you get married, it's supposed to be till death do us part, and in sickness and in health. Obviously, after what she did, I think that he didn't feel that he could be married to her anymore. So he didn't visit her in the hospital at all, and he divorced her. And I understand that he's remarried. And then so when he left, obviously, he didn't want things from the children to remind him. So he took a few things when he left. So I think he had an apartment. So he kept his guitar, and I think he kept a few things from the children, but I think he didn't want to have that reminder all the time. So it was just a few things that he took with him to his apartment in New York. So yeah, so the husband divorced her. Her husband divorced her. I don't know exactly when it was that he divorced her, but he has remarried, and he's remarried a fertility doctor. So I don't know if he divorced her after he met the fertility doctor, or before he married, after he met, or before he met the fertility doctor. But he's moved on with his life after what she did. So she hasn't seen him. I think that sitting in the courtroom, and he was a prosecution witness, that may very well have been the first time that she had seen him after the incident, because from what I understand, he never went to visit her in the hospital. So that may have been the first time that she had seen him, and he was a witness for the prosecution. And they also interviewed his friends, because the day before the incident, she had gone to visit a friend of the husband's, and they had a family gathering. And this friend of the husband's said that during the time that he had known the husband, and during the time that she was off sick for having a baby and being depressed and anxious, that she seemed normal. She seemed normal. And he said that the day before the incident, he just said she was quieter than usual, but she didn't seem crazy or anything like that. He said she was quieter than usual. So she seemed normal when all this was going on. But, and I guess one of her school friends went to visit her in the hospital, and the school friend had been told not to talk to her about the children. So the school friend went to see her as well. And then what she had to do is, when she was in the hospital, when she woke up from everything that had happened to her, she had been intubated. So she had like a pen and paper, and she had to write down questions. And so one of the doctors said, "How do you feel?" And she wrote down horrified. And one of the first questions she had was, "Do I have a lawyer?" So obviously she knew she had done wrong. She was cognizant of the fact that she had done something where she needed a lawyer, because why else would she say, "Do I need a lawyer?" I mean, it's obviously obvious that she's crazy to do what she had done, but I do think it was premeditated. It was planned. And she was saying that a voice told her to do it, and after she did it, the voice stopped. And so that's what I want to talk about, because I've been sectioned twice, and I know people in the mental health community. And so I want to talk about a few of these things because apparently Lindsay Clancy and her ex-husband are suing these healthcare professionals for providing her psychiatric drugs. Well, I think that this healthcare professional she had just saw her like on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting call or something. So she wasn't actually observing her whole body, and she hadn't been qualified very long. And she was prescribing her very strong psychiatric medication. And so basically, the psychiatric Lindsay was having an adverse reaction to the psychiatric medication. So they were just increasing the dosage. So I want to talk about this psychiatric medication. These are what I've written down. I've looked on the internet. She was taking sertraline, don't know what that is. Lorazepam, don't know what that is. These are all psychiatric medications, by the way. Hydroxyzine, don't know what that is. Busperine, I don't know what that is. Trazodone, don't know what that is. Fluoxetine, I think that's Prozac. But we call it Prozac, but pharmacists call it something else. And I think that's Prozac, fluoxetine. Zolpidem, I looked it up, and that's what we call Ambien, and that's a sleep drug. Mirtazapine, don't know what that is. Clonazepam, don't know what that is. Copious, that is definitely a psychiatric drug that I've heard of. Diazepam, that's a psychiatric drug that I've heard of. Lamotrigine, don't know what that is. And amitriptyline. Okay, so basically I'm just going to tell you what I know. For starters, all these psychiatric drugs are going to make you tired. They're gonna dope you up and drug you up, and so that's why they think that she probably had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, because she wasn't sleeping. She was on all these really heavy psychiatric drugs, and she wasn't sleeping, and so that's why they believe she had bipolar disorder. And she obviously had postnatal psychosis to do what she did, but she's saying that the drugs made her do that. She's saying that all these drugs that she was on made her do that. But she kept asking for the drugs. And basically, if you're on psychiatric drugs are sedatives. So if you're on psychiatric drugs, they're going to sedate you. They're not going to perk you up. They're going to sedate you. And so I remember taking like a Valium, which is a diazepam. Diazepam is a Valium. And I took that, something similar to that when I had my second marriage failure, because my ex-husband was going around, driving around in his car, doing something in a sexual nature that was illegal, and he was picked up by the police. And the only reason why he told me is because he was picked up by the police and he had to tell me. And I just pretty much flipped out. I didn't handle it very well, so I flipped out. So I was giving something like diazepam, a tranquilizer, for a week. But when I went back to get some more, he wouldn't give me any more. I was just left to suffer, to use this try to cope the best I could, because they wouldn't give me any more medication to help me with the fact that my husband was a sex offender, and I couldn't cope with that. And then in addition to that, when I had my first implant, I was scared, so they gave me one of those tablets to take when I had my first implant to help me. But in the end, I didn't take it because I was being harassed by this Algerian mechanical engineer. And so I don't think I actually took it. But I had to pay for it. I had to get it from my dentist. And then I do know someone who is actually addicted to diazepam. And the reason why is because 20 years ago, or something like that, he went to the doctor, telling the doctor that he had feelings of wanting to harm himself. And so I think they didn't know what to do with him, because he was rambling. I mean, whenever you talk to him, you know he's just rambling nonstop. And so I think that they decided to prescribe him a benzodiazepam, but they're all diazepams, benzodiazepam, Valium. They're all very highly addicted. So he was prescribed benzodiazepam, although when I looked up this on the internet, they said diazepam, but it's very addictive. And so he was was prescribed benzodiazepam, and the thing is, it's a very addictive substance, and you can't just quit taking it, because if you just quit taking it, you can have a brain injury, but you also get a brain injury from taking the benzodiazepam, and you can't just stop taking it. You have to be tapered off of it. Well, this person I know who is addicted to benzodiazepam, he's still on benzodiazepam, and he's probably going to be on it for the rest of his life because he doesn't really want to do what is required of him to get off of it, because they do have a Change, Grow, Live organization in the town I live at, and he could go to that Change, Grow, Live, and they could give him support to get off of it. But he says that Change, Grow, Live is an organization for street people, and he's not a street person, so he's not going to go. But basically, he really doesn't want to get off of it. He complains, and he says that he's going to sue these medical professionals for actually... Would you get me another Dr. Pepper, please? He's going to sue these medical professionals for prescribing him benzos, but he's doing nothing to get off of it. He wants other people to get him off. He wants to be able to go to a residential program and have people get him off the benzos. Well, he's poor. He's living in poverty, so he can't go to a residential program to get off the benzos because he doesn't have any money. And because he doesn't have any money, he needs to go to this Change, Grow, Live. But he's not going to go to Change, Grow, Live. He comes up with one excuse after another about why he can't get off the benzos. And the main reason is because he says that this Change, Grow, Live place, it's a drug and alcohol addiction center. It's for street people. And he says he's not a street piece. Can you put that can here too? He says he's not a street person, so he's not going there. So he's just hurting himself by not doing anything about it. And in addition, if you watched my previous video, this person who's hooked on benzodiazepam, he was scammed by my former friend who's a scammer, because my former friend who is a scammer told him that there was a place up north, I think it was in Bolton or something, a place up north, a residential facility up north, and he was going to go up north for 2 weeks and go to this residential facility to get off of benzos. And then when he got off of the benzos, he was going to come back down to the town we live in. And in this town I live in, there's lots of people who were hooked on benzos. And he was going to be able to speak to those people. And that's what he wanted. He wants to be able to talk to people who are hooked on benzos. Well, that was a completely made up story. It was a scam. And he got almost £1,000 off of this guy I know, which was a scam. There is no rehab facility in Bolton for people to get off benzos. And even if there was a rehab facility, he wouldn't be able to go to it because he hasn't got any money. He has to rely upon the government to help him. And the government's not going to send him to a residential facility. The government's going to send him to a facility in the town we live in. And then so now this guy was angry with my boyfriend and me because he met this scammer through us. And that's why we're not friends with that scammer anymore, because of what he did. So benzos are really dangerous. There's this psychiatrist called Dr. Joseph, and he can talk to you about the dangers of benzos if you're interested in that. And after the benzos, you've got something called amitriptyline. Well, amitriptyline is also a nerve blocker. And so since I had all of these nerve problems, I was prescribed amitriptyline by a neurologist. And I was supposed to take amitriptyline for 2 weeks to help me get off painkillers. And then after I had not take any more painkillers, and after I had taken amitriptyline for 2 weeks, not to take it anymore. Well, the thing about amitriptyline is, if you look on the packet that gives you the side effects of the drug, one of the side effects of the drugs is you will have thoughts of harming yourself. I don't know if you have thoughts of harming other people, but one of the side effects is you will have thoughts of harming yourself. And I know because I took amitriptyline because I had serious dental problems which caused me pain, for which I was taking over-the-counter medication to try to help me with the pain. And then I took the amitriptyline for 2 weeks. And I do notice that one of the side effects of amitriptyline is you have thoughts of harming yourself. I don't know about harming other people, but harming yourself. And then, and I did actually have those thoughts. I was at work, and I was at work taking this amitriptyline, and I thought what a good idea it would be to do something to harm myself. So I do know that's a side effect of amitriptyline, and I lived through it, and that I knew right away when I was taking this amitriptyline, and I was thinking what a good idea it would be to harm myself. I knew that was a side effect of the amitriptyline. So I lived through that excruciating pain. I don't know if I could live through it again, because now my life is pathetic. I mean, if you watch my videos, you will know when I say thank you for taking an interest in my pathetic life, you will know that I have a pathetic life. So if something like that happened to me now, I don't know if I would live through it. But I did live through it on that occasion because I thought I had something to live for. I thought that if I just hung in there, that everything would clear up and this wonderful life that I had imagined would transpire. But that didn't happen. The pain finally went away, but that didn't happen. I didn't get that wonderful life. So that's my experience of amitriptyline. And also, diazepam is going to make you tired. Amitriptyline is going to make you tired. The next thing we have is fluoxetine, I think it is. And I think that's a name for Prozac. I think fluoxetine is a name for Prozac. So I took Prozac. That's what I think fluoxetine is. I think it's a name for Prozac. So I took Prozac when I had left my second husband because of his sexual preferences and the fact that he was picked up by the police, and he blamed me. He told the police that it was my fault, that he was driving around all over southern UK doing something of a sexual nature that was illegal, and he blamed me. He blamed me for it. And so I knew nothing of it. I was the last to know, the last to find out. And so basically, when that happened, I knew that my marriage was over. I didn't want to be married to him anymore. So I guess I didn't take my marriage vows seriously either, because when you take your marriage vows, it's like in sickness and in health. And obviously, he's mentally sick to do something like that. But I consider the marriage to be over after he did something like that. And then so after him, I was invited out by a friend. And she's not the good friend that she used to be. You know, because the thing is when you go through hard times, you find out who your real friends are. And so when I went through hard times, she wasn't there for me. So she's not the friend that I thought she was. But I had been invited out by her, and I met this guy, who also had a mental illness, and he admitted to me that he had a mental illness, and I got mixed up with him. And then so that was a nightmare. So obviously I'd left my husband, who had a sexual deviation, a sexual perversion. So I left him. I got mixed up with this guy with a mental illness. And so I left my home because I was scared of my husband anyway. And so I'd left my home, and I was all alone, all by myself, living in the UK with no support. And this mentally ill guy was making me mentally ill. So I was prescribed Prozac. Well, Prozac was supposed to be a wonder drug. And so they wrote a book called Prozac Nation. So it's supposed to be for people who are depressed. But Prozac is one of the newer psychiatric medications. And so again, Prozac has a lot of side effects as well. So there's lots of controversy about Prozac. And I do know someone who had postnatal depression, and she was taking Prozac for postnatal depression, and she was off work for about a year for postnatal depression. And then basically, so they put her on Prozac every day, and then after a while they put her on Prozac every other day, and then after a while they put her on Prozac every 3 days. I personally didn't find Prozac to be helpful, but the thing that I find is it caused me to have some thoughts that I normally wouldn't have. For instance, when I was in a shop, it caused me to want to take items without paying for them. And so it caused me to want to be aggressive. So Prozac is not necessarily a good drug. I don't know exactly what all of the side effects of this drug are, but it's not a good drug. And so her taking Prozac may have been one of the reasons that she did what she did. Because I do remember when I was on Prozac, I would have these feelings of euphoria and feelings of elation. And then I would have feelings of despair. And then I would be in a shop, and I would have this overwhelming urge to take an item without paying for it. And there have been instances where famous people have done that and have gotten caught and have had court cases. So I don't think Prozac is a good drug to take, and there have been loads of instances about Prozac, so it's not a good drug to take at all. You've got Ambien, which is Zolpidem. Ambien is a sleeping pill. It's a sleeping tablet, and one of the side effects of Ambien is it makes you compulsively eat. So when a person is on Ambien, when they're sleeping, they will sleepwalk into the kitchen and eat lots and lots of food. And I can tell you about one time I was reading an article in a ladies' magazine about Ambien, about this woman who'd been on Ambien, which is a sleeping tablet, and she'd gained like 150, 200 pounds being on this sleeping tablet, and she didn't know why. She didn't know why she had gained all this weight. And so basically what it was, when she was on this Ambien, she would get up in the middle of the night and eat. And that's what happened to my mom. My mom has always been conscious of her weight, always been conscious of her figure, and then for some reason, and she had problems sleeping too, and so she got this doctor to give her Ambien. And so when she got on the Ambien, she was getting up in the middle of the night and she was sleepwalking to the kitchen, and she was eating whatever was in the refrigerator. And she would wake up and she'd have food crumbs all over her where she'd eaten. So again, my mom got up to at least 250 pounds, maybe even more, by taking Ambien. So Ambien's not a good drug to take if you're watching your weight. Another drug that she was given is cetiapin. Now, I had cetiapin forced on me, and the reason why I had cetiapin forced on me is when I was harassed out of my job at Foster Wheeler, and what happened was I had a panic attack because I'd been harassed out of my job, and I was worried that I was going to be harassed out of my home, and so it was a Saturday night, and I was phoning around trying to get some help, and somebody had given me the phone number to the crisis team, but they didn't tell me it was the crisis team. They just said, ring this number. So I rang the number, not knowing it was a mental health crisis team. And so once you ring the crisis team, they're never going to let you go because they want to stay in a job. So once you ring the crisis team, they're going to say you're mentally ill. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. They're going to say you're mentally ill. And so basically, they forced me to go to the crisis team. They said that if I didn't go, they were going to get a court order and make me go. So I went to see the psychiatrist at the crisis team, and I told them what was happening. Of course, they don't believe you. They don't believe you, which I didn't know this, but I do now because of the work that Dr. Jessica Taylor has done, that when people report abuse, women in particular, they're told they're mentally ill. And that's exactly what they did to me. They told me I was mentally ill. And they forced me to take cetiapin. They actually came to my home and forced me to take cetiapin. Well, the thing is number one, after I took cetiapin, I tried to take a bath, and I very nearly collapsed. Very nearly drowned in the bathtub. So I didn't want to take any more cetiapin. It makes you really tired and really drowsy. And then so also it makes you want to eat. That's the thing about cetiapin. It makes you want to eat. So this is the list of drugs. This list of drugs that this Lindsay Clancy was on, and the number of drugs that I personally have taken or know people who have taken is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 out of those drugs I have personal first-hand or second-hand experience of. And then basically they say most of the drugs were benzo. So Lindsay Clancy was worried about getting addicted to the benzos, so quite a lot of these drugs were benzos, and she was worried about being addicted to them. And so I just don't know how many of these drugs that she actually took, because the thing is the drugs that I know of, they're going to make you really tired. You're not going to be able to drive a car. You're not going to be able to look after your children. You're not going to be able to do much of anything. And so the thing is that how could she even, if you're on these drugs, these are psychiatric drugs. If you're on these drugs, you're not going to be able to function. You're not going to be able to take care of your children. You're not going to be able to drive a car. You're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to do anything. And so I just wonder how much of the drugs that she actually was taking. So when she was in the hospital, they did a tox screen on her, and they did find a number of drugs in her bloodstream, but they were not out of range. And then when the police went and looked at the house after the incident, they did take a number of bottles of the drugs, but they didn't take all of the bottles. They had forgotten to take some. But in these bottles that the police had taken, she hadn't taken all the drugs in the bottles. So it just makes you wonder how many of these drugs did she actually take. So she's suing these medical professionals for prescribing her drugs. But it makes you wonder just how many did she take? Because the amount of drugs that they were giving her would knock out a horse, you know? And she was running around. She was running around, driving children to school, driving to hospitals, looking after the children, looking after the husband. I don't know. I'm not sure that she took all the drugs that she was prescribed, because if she took all the drugs that she was prescribed, she would be like in a coma, you know? And she wasn't sleeping. The only thing that she would make her sleep was Ambien. Okay, so another thing is these psychiatric drugs, they make you want to eat. And I've said that in a previous video, that these psychiatric drugs make you want to eat. Lindsay Clancy was a very slim woman. She was going to the gym and she was running 5 miles. She was a very slim woman and she was exercising. And they said that exercising was going to be good for her mental health, which it is. But did she gain weight when she was on these psychiatric drugs? Did she gain weight? Because that's one of the problems with psychiatric drugs, is they make you gain weight. So I don't know. They're saying that she's suing these medical professionals for giving her the drugs. Just like this friend of mine who's addicted to benzos. He says that he wants to sue the doctor for giving him benzos. He's saying that he never should have been given benzos in the first place. But at some point, people have to take personal responsibility. I mean, she was a nurse. Lindsay Clancy was a nurse. So she knew what these drugs were. She could have looked up the drugs on the internet to look at the side effects. She maybe even have given a list of side effects when she got the drugs. So she was a nurse. She was a professional, medical professional. She knew that, because she obviously knew that benzos or diazepam was addicted. So she knew that. So she should have looked on the internet to find out what was going on with all these drugs. Just like my friend who wants to sue the National Health System in the UK for prescribing him drugs. But that is never going to work out. That's never going to happen, because if you want to sue somebody for prescribing you drugs, you have to do it right away. And so my friend who keeps saying he's going to sue people, well, he hasn't done it right away. It's been 20 years, and he's known for 20 years that they shouldn't have prescribed him drugs. So he just keeps saying he's going to sue them for prescribing him drugs, but he's not done it. He's not done it. He should have done it right away. But so I don't know how far Lindsay Clancy and her ex-husband are going to get in this lawsuit. So the ex-husband may get somewhere, because he's not a medical professional, so he might not know the side effects of all these drugs. But since Lindsay Clancy was a nurse and a medical professional, she would have known what the side effects were. If she didn't know the side effects, then she would have been able to go onto the internet and look up the drug and look up the side effects herself, which she didn't do. And so I can tell you about the amitriptyline. It made me think it would be a really good idea to do something to myself, but I never thought it was a good idea to do something to somebody else. And the Prozac, I thought it would be a really good idea to take something without paying for it, but I never thought it would be a good idea to harm somebody else. And the copious just puts you in a coma almost, and the Ambien puts you in a coma almost. So I don't know how far Lindsay Clancy is going to get in a lawsuit. Her husband may get somewhere because he's not a medical professional, but Lindsay Clancy definitely would have known to look at the side effects of all these drugs, which she didn't do. So that's my take on all the drugs that Lindsay Clancy was taking. And as a nurse and a medical professional, she should have known better than to take all these drugs, because she was going to at least 2 people and getting drugs from at least 2 people. So I don't know whether she's going to get off or not, whether they're going to say she's not guilty by means of insanity or not. I mean, obviously she's crazy to do what she has done, but it's for the court to decide how crazy she is. Was she so crazy that she's not criminally responsible? So thank you so much for watching this video and listening to my take on all the drugs that Lindsay Clancy was taking, based upon my personal experience and the personal experiences of people who I know. And thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. And thank you so much for taking an interest in my pathetic life.